morning, Betty. How are you?
Great. Good morning, Alfredo. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have you here at SerpGuru Coffee Chats. Uh, I'm here with Betty DeVita, a relentless global leader. She has worn many hats in her career. She'll wanna talk about her journey in a little bit. Right now, she's the Chief Business Officer for FinConecta, a global company that is looking to interconnect ecosystems, innovative players across many verticals. Last summer, they were featured in the CNBC program Advancement conducted by Ted Danson. But I think Betty is going to share with us her journey. So without further ado, I'll let her talk about her career journey up until now.
Thank you. So exciting to actually share what I would call a traditional upbringing in banking. I'm an ex-banker, started with Citibank, and actually started as a part-time teller while I was in university because I needed some spending money, and never in my wildest imagination did I expect that I would end up as the CEO and chair of one of the big subsidiaries for a city in Canada. And so that journey was, woven with many different steps. I am a New Yorker. I started in New York with Citi and spent 8 years in different roles, starting from a management associate program through to branch manager. So really got to understand the retail business. And then I started to get involved in technology. So I think the tech piece was always part of a passion that I had, trying to look at how the branches were moving from service locations to sales locations, and what type of technology was needed in order to facilitate that. I did that for the US business and then was asked to move to Florida to do something similar for the Latin American business. And so that was the first time when I had my husband, who is an extraordinary partner with me. He quit his job and we moved from New York to Florida together. I spent 7 years in Florida in the region working on new systems implementations, and knew that I wanted to actually be a general manager and run a business. And so I was given the opportunity to move to Venezuela and run the consumer business there. It was during the time of Hugo Chavez, so there were quite a few obstacles and challenges. But in the end, it was, leadership comes from adversity. And after a number of years, I assumed more responsibility in Latin America for North Latin America. And then Citi bought a bank in Korea. And I was given the opportunity to go run the consumer business of that bank in Seoul, South Korea. So moved my family. I had landed in Venezuela with a son and a husband, and I actually was pregnant and I gave birth to my daughter in Venezuela. And so the four of us moved to Korea in a bank that we had just acquired and spent 3 years there. There was a lot of adversity because Korea is a market with a lot of labor unions. 90% of the employees were in labor unions. And from there was an opportunity to go be the chair and CEO in Canada for Citi. And I did that, and it was supposed to be an extraordinary opportunity for kind of a calm market from South America or Latin America to Korea to Canada, except that it was in the moment of the global financial crisis. And so I landed in a market where the world was now upside down, and Canada was no exception. I spent 3 years working through all types of regulatory challenges, business challenges, and I was asked to then move from Citi to Mastercard, where I spent 4 or 5 years in the market as the president. And then my obsession with technology continued. And there was an opportunity for me to go to Mastercard in our new tech hub in New York City. And finally, after 15, 16 years as an expat, I moved back to New York, and I became the Chief Commercial Officer for Digital Payments and Labs. Got involved in a lot of new innovations, spent 4 or 5 years working on IoT, mobile payments, got to speak on stage at CES with Samsung, one of our customers, extraordinary opportunity. And in 2019, I left MasterCard, and 2 months later connected with Jorge Ruiz, the CEO and founder for FinConecta. And that's kind of where we are today, Chief Business Officer.
The rest is history.
So full circle, if you will.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that great intro, Betty. So can you share a little bit more about FinConecta in particular, a high-level overview of the company?
Sure. So FinConnect is a turnkey solution. It's an API middleware platform that was founded 2017 by Jorge Ruiz, also an ex-Citi banker. There's a few Citi bankers that are at this startup. And it was born really from the pain point of integrating between financial institutions and startups. So the desire is there. There's no doubt that financial institutions are looking and understanding that they have to start to crowdsource some of their innovation and some of these technologies that thousands and thousands of fintechs have developed. But the process by which they do this, this collaboration is a bumpy journey. And so between the policies as well as the technology integration, we saw a pain point to try and resolve this continuous integration one-to-one. And we developed a switch and a middleware platform to connect financial institutions to startups. We've curated a couple of hundred startups in a solution store, and with this middleware platform, allow the migration to cloud, allow crowdsourcing, allowed innovation processes and platforms, and really have now connected to open banking, which is another phenomenon, in addition to just this interest with financial institutions in working with startups. The last comment I'll make is the phenomenon is also, of course, driven by a lot of the work that the digital players are doing with regard to getting into technology. And so this we view as a real opportunity to be able to work with financial institutions to try and get them to a more innovative place with regard to the services they deliver via our either open banking as a service platform, our marketplace, or just the ability to really guide them through the digital transformation journey.
Great. And that's a great segue talking about customers for my next question, which is, how do you find information about your potential customers, whether they are institutions or startups? How do you go about that?
We're a B2B company. You know, you start where you know that you are, you know, going to find the fish, if you will. Our starting point really was medium and small financial institutions. Much of that began with our network, but I mean, there is the traditional process of you know, connecting with associations, looking at using LinkedIn, using the SEO, to your point. And as I think about the B2B space, a lot of it is really started with our network. From there, it grew to the partnerships. And so the strategic partnerships really is a huge funnel for B2B marketing. How do you gain access to the customers of some strategic partners? And part of our startup process began with IDB, the Inter-American Development Bank, and the access that they had to financial institutions. FMO, the Dutch Development Bank, and the access that they had to the African institutions. And so this was the beginning of the journey. It was a combination of strategic partnerships, strategic investors, the access that these partners bring to you with regard to the customers and the members and their network. And so this notion of one-to-many, which I know you understand well because of your background, is really a key driver. And in fact, our kind of flagship customer in Mexico, Prosa, is really about this type of strategic customer B2B engagement, right? So Prosa has about 160 institutions that they're connected to. They've actually white labeled our product. And the objective is now to allow them to deploy innovative solutions to their customers. So I would very much say it's around strategic partners and the one-to-many approach.
That's great. Thanks for that context, Betty. And could you share? And I share, I share the approach. Definitely makes total business sense. A successful tip or hack, if you will, when you go about securing those strategic partnerships. I know the access is important, the network, but then, after that, what would you advise?
So, I think a lot of it is around where is this customer in their digital transformation journey? Is there a specific pain point? So I think in any industry, it's about understanding the customer need and the customer either pain point or market opportunity that they're going after. So it's really about understanding needs. It's really interesting to go and present your product, but without really understanding particular nuance of what's either going on in a market. And there's both offense and defense. I think open banking and the regulatory environment is a great example of that. In Europe, many banks had to comply with PSD2, all of the banks, at least in the UK and in many other markets. And it was a defensive strategy in order to ensure that they were on side with the regulatory requirements. Having said that, if you move to the US, the take up on dealing with third parties was not because of regulation, it was because of a market opportunity, because consumers were saying, I want to have my experience in everything I do on this device, be at a level of where I'm spending most of my time. So the big digital players where the customer journey is quite smooth. And so, and one click or two click and information is remembered. So, or is stored. So if you look at that as a market opportunity, some financial institutions that we're talking to are trying to seize the moment on the market opportunity. That's a great hack. Some are trying to deal with specific business issues that are very particular to their institution, and they have a real need around, and it's very much a driver today, digital ID and onboarding. And with the pandemic, the requirement to not force consumers to come into branches to sign documents, the problem in the case against employees going into the branch in the beginning of the pandemic when everybody was on shutdown. So you really have to start with the customer, understand the pain or the opportunity, And our platform has so many modules and so many components, and it's been built over time to be able to really be fit for purpose, depending on the small or medium financial institution, the large institution, the ability to do white labeling, and based on understanding need and then understanding the modules within the platform, we're able to do a fit against a very clear market or business opportunity or risk.
That's great. And you mentioned Prosa, which is a very large payment processor in Mexico.
Yes.
Are there any particular type of businesses or any type of parts of the payments value chain or the retail banking where you are more attracted to provide solutions at FinConecta?
I mean, we're a middleware company, so we really want to be part of infrastructure. I'm not sure how sexy you think infrastructure is, but if your infrastructure is not working and you have this desire to work with a third party and your technology company is telling you that it's going to take 9 to 12 months and cost $2 or $3 million, for me, that feels like a big issue. Knowing that the cloud providers, the digital solution providers, the third parties, the startups, and ourselves could get it done, 10 times faster and at a significant reduction in CapEx. In fact, one of the things we talk about is this notion of, moving from CapEx to OpEx, and how that really starts to move financial institutions away from having to continue to invest in legacy systems, move more to the cloud in a very controlled and secure way, understanding all of the consents that are required, and really start to using our sandbox with 50 plus standardized APIs, test these solutions in an iterative process, understanding what this would look like in their environment. And then again, very controlled, process driven, moving it into production. So I would say we talk a lot about the end solutions, the fintechs and startups that we've curated, and digital ID and authentication and onboarding is hot, and rewards and loyalty is hot, but we're really all about the infrastructure. So we're going to say today, I'm going to say it, infrastructure is sexy.
Noted.
Okay.
So earlier in the call, you said about your passion about digital businesses. I would love to learn more a little bit about your work style in terms of productivity. How do you maintain yourself motivated?
I have two children, a 20 and a 25-year-old. My 25-year-old is almost off the payroll working in media, actually. He has benefits and a 401k, and so I'm very happy. My daughter is, they give me the motivation, and I view her similar to me. We're both very, internally motivated and driven. And some of that is just internal from the way we are wired. With the pandemic, I think it's been a real crisis with regard to how people are continuing, how resilient they are, how the ability to pivot is such a critical one in order to maintain your motivation. We bought, so I've had the wonderful privilege to be with my children more than I think I would have been because of the pandemic. So I also I'm a glass half full person and see the silver lining of I got to actually spend probably an extra year with my kids because of the pandemic. And what I would say is, I try and make time for myself. I walk with my dog in the morning. I read. I love reading The Morning Brew. It's one of my favorites with regard to getting snippets of information in a digestible fashion. And so I feel like I can start the day. I read the morning brew. I do not keep my phone near my bed. I keep it in the bathroom. It's one of the things I learned because it's just obsessive. And so I try and in the walk in the morning, really give myself some time to meditate and just think about the day and my family commitments and trying to kind of put everything in order. But one of the things I think also for me is that I really review the night before what the next day looks like and trying to put pieces in priority order, timing pieces that have longer expectations and deadlines. We've got a ton of customers that we're working on many things at the same time. Como se dice, muchos bailes en el aire, something like that, right? Many balls in the air. And how do you not only, for me, keep me motivated and productive and balanced, which is something that I did not have, I think, in the earlier part of my career. How do you keep your team motivated and productive, especially a team that is, completely virtual and in, I think, 4 different countries.
And I definitely, I share the love for walking, and I'm also a huge fan of the morning brew, one of my early companions in the morning with my cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Love it. You were talking about resilience and having been very successful yourself in corporate America, moving to the startup community. What has been your biggest setback thus far as an entrepreneur, if any?
Yeah, I mean, I would say for me, it's around this notion of multi-generational connections, right? If I walked into a room, or if I think of my career and the number of times that I've walked into a room being the only woman, it's too many to actually, mention. And I do think about that. I don't want my daughter to have to experience that and the feelings and some of the things that I, did to fit in. I remember learning how to smoke a cigar and drink a glass of red wine. And in the end, I actually kind of enjoyed that, but I did feel like it was almost like a rite of passage in order to be part of the group as the only woman in the leadership team. And I think those kind of pressures, I don't want that to be a continued trend. I think people need to, like, if I didn't want to smoke and drink red wine, I don't know if it would have been a good part of the initiation, And so I think about now in the startup world, I still am in a lot of meetings where I am the only woman. I will be very proud to tell you that in FinConecta, our leadership team is 4 women and 2 men. So we actually have it reversed. And I feel like I'm one of the only, pure kind of multi-generational type of role models. And so I love this notion of the intergenerational connections. And I saw it when I was at Mastercard, when I moved into the tech hub, and I went from being president of a business with, all of the support services, comms and HR and legal and compliance and offices, et cetera, to sitting in a bench in an open workspace with a great colleague who was, I think, 28 or 29. And I think that transformation and that experience has really just, given me the tools to be able to say, if you are open to learning from each other, and you realize that there are things in my experience and background that I could teach him, for example, and there are a ton of things on the tech side and the engineering side that he can teach me. This could be a really, really powerful combination. And so I wouldn't call it a setback, but I would call it kind of a reset, if you will, of the way that people can find their commonalities and make the yin and the yang of their value propositions and their strengths work together, as opposed to focusing on the differences. And so I love now this intergenerational connection in the startup world, and I will continue to try and push that.
Very nice. And that's great. It's great to hear. I like to ask this question to my interviewees to know a little bit what makes them interesting in personal. And based on your personal interest, can you share a favorite book or movie that you've come across recently?
I'm a big movie person, I will say, but I am in the midst of reading Making of a Bank by Ann Bowden, who is the CEO and founder for Sterling Bank. And so, you know, I'll just share with you because I think it's very much apropos to the whole startup. And she was completely underestimated. Again, back to this point of this, you know, 50s woman in banking, traditional banking in the UK, who had this idea of the way that financial institutions offered their, you know, as basic as a checking account was just not good enough. And I just love, I'm not finished yet, but I just love the audacity and the resilience that she has as she's going around and trying to find the players that would be part of her team and how would she get funded, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, that is a great story with regard to how, you know, don't judge a book by its cover, if you will. Maybe she has a hoodie now, but she was not walking in as a 20-something engineer with a hoodie from Silicon Valley, or Austin or New York. And I mean, UK is obviously a huge center for FinTech. But I really, really am enjoying her journey, and I'm very much relating to it. So I will leave you with that as my current book choice. Yeah.
I love reading, so I'll look into that book for sure.
For sure. The Making of a Bank.
Let me know when you finish it too. My last question for you today would be to share a fun fact that people don't know about you.
Well, you know, many things in the pandemic have driven people to, I don't know if you want to call it a side hustle or looking at another component of their persona and trying to find, you know, what needs or what, you know, what juice has not been untapped. And for me, we have a puppy now, and the puppy, her name is Lilo. When I started in Florida and then I went to New York, and in Manhattan, the dog story is this whole subculture and community. And I think I've lived in New York City since, well, I was born there, but let's say, you know, many, many years. I don't know that you really talk to a lot of people in New York, right? On the streets. Well, with the dog, you actually do talk to people. And there's this whole community of dog owners, and many people in the pandemic also got puppies. And so I am actually writing a children's book about the puppies of Beekman Place. It's the name of it. And I'm doing it through the lens of small dogs, large dogs, different colors, long hair, short hair, they don't see color and size. And so for me, I want to have some moral to the story, but I'm, tapping into some creative juices that I've actually never, put any time into. Both my children are writers. I like to write as well. And so I'll let you know when that's finished, but children's book author.
Very nice, very nice. I love to share that I also had a hustle this past year and didn't write a book, but co-published one.
Okay.
Friends. So
well, I'm not finished with my book, so I'm halfway through, collaborating with my husband, actually, who is a elementary school teacher. But it's a different part of your brain.
Right.
And I think it's really interesting, as hopefully people here go and try and explore other parts of your brain that you're not using on a regular basis, and see what that does to your overall persona, your spirit, your energy.
Definitely.
So I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Tell me about your publishing.
So because of the pandemic, I was talking to a couple of friends on and off from business school, and then we started to have video calls, and then we thought, what can we do together? And we said, how about we share stories? So we collected 12 stories, holiday stories, and we co-published an ebook about 12 stories for 12 Christmas short stories. So it's on Amazon, and it was a very rewarding experience, which is kind of now driving us to start writing own content. So more to come on that, but at least we learned that now of publishing a very interesting work, a different side of the brain that you put in action. And the best part for me and the most rewarding was doing it with friends that I trusted for a long time.
Yeah, I think the notion of collaboration is also a really, really interesting dynamic, especially because we've all been kind of pushed to stay home and be on our own. And so this notion of collaboration, even if it's virtual, although, I am so ready for it to not be virtual, is just I think an extraordinary human need. And I look forward to continued collaboration.
I agree 100%. Betty, it's been a pleasure to have you here today at SerpGuru Coffee Chats. I wish you all the best with FinConecta and your future endeavors. And I'm sure we'll be in touch.
Very much appreciated. Have a great day. Thanks, Alfredo.
You too. Thank you very much.